Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're really going deep, huh? Into Gabor Mate's The Myth of Normal. You've definitely got some thoughts on this one.
Looks like you're pretty intrigued by this whole myth of normal idea, how it shapes us, maybe even makes us sick.
It's a big one.
Yeah,
So Mate starts off right by saying trauma is way more common than we think. And he's not just talking about those huge life-altering events.
it's the little things too, right? The everyday stuff that just kind of grinds you down over time.
Yeah, exactly. Like, have you ever felt, I don't know, unsafe
Mm-hmm.
or just powerless, even in a situation that wasn't like a big deal?
Med's point is those experiences stick with you. He even compares ignoring the emotional side of illness to treating the smoke but not the fire.
That's a good one. Makes you think, how much of, I don't know, our everyday behavior, even maybe our personality is rooted in stuff we don't even remember?
Exactly. Like those patterns we have, they start as coping mechanisms when we're kids, to deal with tough situations. But then later on, they cause problems, stress, anxiety, even physical stuff.
And that's a big part of what Mate's getting at, right? This connection between trauma, stress, and getting sick, our emotional distress, it can actually like show up in the body.
He calls it mind-body unity.
Mm.
And he's got some pretty powerful stories to illustrate it, like Glenda. Her Crohn's disease flared up after she recovered repressed memories of childhood trauma. And there's Mio. She felt like her body was a battleground because of scleroderma.
Man, reading that, you really wonder, how often doctors miss the emotional part of illness, like focusing on the symptoms without getting to the root of it.
Right, like Maite says, medicine tends to separate the mind and body. He's
Yeah.
pushing for a more holistic approach, where you see how connected our physical and emotional well-being actually are.
And then there's this part about child rearing. Mate compares how we raise kids now to, get this, the evolved nest. It's how our hunter-gatherer ancestors did it. Pretty different.
He describes this evolved nest as like constant touch, responding to a baby's needs, like right away, breastfeeding, whatever, and almost no separation from the primary caregiver. Mate thinks those were essential for like healthy development back then. But now, well, they're often missing.
I never really thought about how my childhood stacks up against this evolved nest idea. What do you think are the biggest things kids are missing out on today?
It's a good question. Meat talks about a lot of things, like way too much screen time, kids focusing too much on their peers, not enough community support. He's concerned about anxiety, loneliness, trouble forming healthy attachments.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what our crazy, fast-paced world is doing to kids on like a deeper level. But I mean, isn't some stress just normal? Where's the line between that and the chronic stress Mate's worried about?
It's an important distinction, yeah. Short-term stress, that can be good, right? Motivating. But when it's chronic, nonstop, that overwhelms our system. And it leads to all kinds of bad stuff. Meat thinks a lot of modern life, like work pressure, social isolation. It all adds to this epidemic of chronic stress.
And that leads us to addiction, right? Another area where Mate's done a ton of work. He really challenges the usual views, saying it's not about like being a bad person, but more about reacting to pain and unmet needs.
He goes deeper than just choice or
Hmm.
disease. It's a more compassionate way of looking at it, recognizing the trauma and the psychological stuff that's usually going on. Instead of asking what's wrong with you, he's asking what happened to you.
That's a huge shift, isn't it? And I thought this success addiction concept was really interesting. Like, even good things, if we're using them to hide our pain, can become unhealthy.
Totally. Our culture can actually reward behaviors that are bad for us in the long run. Mate saying real fulfillment comes from connecting with who you really are, not chasing external stuff, validation or achievements.
Easy to fall into that trap, though, right? Especially these days.
No question. Mate wants us to look beyond the addiction itself, to those deeper needs and those wounds that might be driving it. He sees it as like a messed up attempt to self-medicate, trying to cope with pain, but it ends up causing more suffering.
So, speaking of culture, right? The book's subtitle mentions toxic culture.
Mm-hmm.
What's Mate's take on that? What are the things he sees as being really bad for us?
He's got a few key issues. The pressure to fit in, to be like everyone else, going after money and stuff instead of real connection, and just accepting chronic stress and overwork as normal.
It's like we're constantly told we're not enough. Work harder, earn more, buy more, achieve more, then you'll be happy.
And that's the messaging Mate's calling toxic. It makes us feel like something's missing, right? Like we're insecure, and then we end up chasing external validation instead of what we really need and value.
It's a hamster wheel, isn't it? Always striving, but never really getting there.
Exactly. May wants us to question those messages,
Mm.
to find fulfillment from within, that inner peace and wholeness that doesn't depend on what's happening outside of us.
What about loneliness? Mate talks about that a lot. Seems kind of strange, doesn't it? In a world where we're always connected.
Yeah, a real paradox. Even though we're constantly communicating online and everything, genuine connection, it seems to be fading. May thinks we're replacing real human interaction with those superficial online interactions. And it's having some serious consequences, mentally and physically.
So all these challenges, trauma, a toxic culture, not feeling connected. Is there any hope? What does Mayte say we can do about it?
We'll get into some answers in the next part. It's not all doom and gloom, though. Meat definitely believes we can heal. But it means challenging the way things are and embracing a different way of being in the world. So you're asking if there's hope, right, with all this stuff going on. Well, Mehdi's definitely optimistic. He thinks we can heal. But it takes changing things up a bit, how we do things, how we see the world.
Sounds good, but kind of overwhelming too. Where do you even start?
Well, May talks about a lot of different things, but one of the most important is self-compassion. It's like treating yourself the way you treat someone you care about, when they're going through something tough,
Yeah, that makes sense. It's so easy to be hard on yourself, especially when you're feeling lost or disconnected.
for sure. And that inner critic, it can really block healing. Mate says we got to cultivate a different voice inside, one that's more supportive, acknowledges the pain, but without judging. That helps us move forward gently.
Okay, I get that. But what about practical stuff in this toxic culture? Like, how do we actually live a healthier life? It feels like an uphill battle sometimes.
It can, yeah. But Mace has some ideas, like specific things we can do. One is setting boundaries, saying no to stuff that drains you or goes against your values.
So basically, putting your own well-being first, even if it means like disappointing people or, not following the crowd.
Exactly. Realizing that we have limited time and energy, right? We got to be smart about how we spend those. Mate also talks about mindfulness, paying attention to the present moment without judgment.
Right, like meditation. You mentioned that earlier. I've tried it, but I can never quiet my mind. Is that really possible for everyone, the stillness Mate talks about?
It takes practice.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy, especially with everything going on around us. But May thinks even just a few minutes of mindfulness can make a difference. Start small, a few minutes a day, then gradually do more as you get comfortable.
So it's not about like becoming a Zen master or anything, more about just being present throughout the day.
Yeah, that's it. Noticing your thoughts and feelings, but not
Yeah.
getting carried away by them, and learning to handle challenges with more clarity and calmness.
Sounds useful, but I bet it takes a while to develop that kind of awareness.
It does, but the benefits are worth it. Made also talks about connecting with something bigger than ourselves. Could be nature, spirituality, art, music, even just helping others, being compassionate.
That resonates with me. Being in nature always makes me feel so peaceful, connected somehow.
That's a great example. For other people, it might be, expressing themselves creatively or through spiritual practices or just spending time with loved ones. The point is, find what feeds your soul, what makes you feel connected to something larger than yourself.
So it sounds like Mate's advocating for like a whole person approach to well-being, taking care of the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual parts of ourselves.
Exactly. It's recognizing that we're not just individuals, but interconnected beings, part of something bigger. And when we nurture that connection, we create the conditions for real, lasting healing.
Now, Matta also talks about the connection between trauma and politics, which feels really relevant, with everything going on in the world. What are some of his main points there?
He argues that political systems, they often reflect the collective trauma of a society, and that leaders, especially those in powerful positions, often show signs of unresolved trauma.
So he's saying there might be a link between like personal trauma and someone becoming authoritarian or abusing their power.
That's one of his arguments, yeah. People who have experienced trauma, they might be more likely to be controlling or manipulative,
Hmm.
as a way to deal with their own inner stuff and hold on to a sense of power.
Wow, that's kind of scary to think about. And it makes you wonder how much of the division and polarization we see, it's maybe coming from unhealed trauma on a personal level and also as a society.
It's complicated, for
Well,
sure. But Métis wants us to look deeper than just the political arguments, to consider the psychological and emotional stuff that's happening underneath. He says that for real societal healing, we got to address the root causes of trauma and create a culture of compassion, understanding, connection.
That's a tall order, but it seems crucial if we want a more peaceful, just world.
Absolutely. And it starts with each of us, doing our own inner work, healing our own wounds, and being more compassionate and understanding towards ourselves and others.
That's a powerful message. It sounds like Mate believes that those individual acts of healing, they can actually have a ripple effect, leading to a more healed, harmonious society.
Exactly. He thinks we have the power to create a world where everyone can heal, can thrive, can live authentically.
This has been really insightful, and I'm already feeling inspired to, take some of these ideas and try to apply them to my own life. Before we move on to the last part, I want to leave our listener with something to think about. How can you bring more authenticity into your life, starting today?
That's a great question to reflect on. What small steps can you take to honor your true self, to set those healthy boundaries, and to create a more fulfilling life? One that really means something to you.
It's about making choices that match your values, what's important to you, and being kind to yourself along the way, because there will be challenges. In our final segment, we'll dive into some even deeper aspects of healing. We'll be exploring things like meditation, psychedelics, and the power of spiritual connection. Stay with us.
So we've covered a lot of ground, huh? The challenges, self-compassion, setting boundaries. Now, I'm really interested in these deeper levels of healing May talks about, specifically meditation and psychedelics. You were saying earlier they can both be like powerful tools for transformation.
Yeah, they can. But it's really important to approach them with, respect and intention. Like with meditation, it's about cultivating stillness.
Yeah.
So we can observe our thoughts and feelings without getting swept away.
So it's kind of like stepping back from that constant mental noise, becoming more of an observer instead of getting caught up in every thought and feeling.
Exactly. That detachment helps us realize, we are not our thoughts or our emotions. There's a deeper self, a core being that's untouched by all the ups and downs of the mind. That makes sense. So how does psychedelics fit in? May talks about his own ayahuasca experience, and it sounds intense, but also like really transformative.
Yeah, psychedelics, when used responsibly, can offer a glimpse into that deeper self. That's like a temporary dissolving of the ego, right?
Yeah.
And it can lead to profound insights, emotional breakthroughs. It can help us face our deepest fears, our traumas, in a way that ultimately heals and creates a renewed sense of connection with ourselves and with the world.
It's like they shake things up, how we usually see reality, and let us see things from a totally different angle.
Exactly. And in that altered state, we can tap into a level of wisdom and understanding that's incredibly healing. Transformative, even. Mate's really clear, though. It's not about escaping reality. It's about confronting it in a new way. That can lead to lasting change.
So it's about using these tools to help us understand ourselves and our place in the universe better. Mate also talks a lot about spiritual connection as part of healing. What's he getting at there?
Well, for Mate, spirituality isn't about, like, religious dogma. It's about connecting with something bigger than ourselves, a sense of belonging to something greater. That can come through nature, art, music, even acts of service, compassion for others.
Yeah.
It's recognizing that we're not just isolated individuals, but interconnected beings woven into the fabric of existence.
It's like remembering that feeling of awe and wonder that we kind of lose touch with as we get caught up in everyday life.
Yeah, that's it. And that feeling of connection can be so healing, so empowering, gives us purpose, meaning. It reminds us that we're part of something much, much bigger.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the myth of normal, what are the key takeaways for our listener? What should they keep in mind on this journey of healing, of reclaiming their authenticity?
I think it comes down to a few things. Recognizing the power of self-compassion, really paying attention to our thoughts and emotions with mindfulness, and nurturing that connection to something greater than ourselves. It's about questioning this myth of normal and embracing who we really are.
And remembering it's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. There will be ups and downs, times when things are clear and times when they're not. But the most important thing is to keep moving forward, keep exploring, keep trusting the wisdom that's inside all of us.
This has been a really, really insightful conversation. Thank you so much for walking us through all of this.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listener, we hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought and maybe even inspired you to, start your own journey of healing and self-discovery. Remember, you have the power to heal. Embrace who you are, nurture your connections, and trust the process.